All right,
All right.
boys. Episode 2 of the 8th round pick.
Great to be
Welcome
here.
back. It is great to be here. Much requested. And guys, I would like to clarify, many of you have asked me IRL when episodes come out. We film them every Monday,
Mhm.
and depending on whether I edit them or not, they should come out either Monday or Tuesday.
Most
Yes,
likely.
sir.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Oh, and shout out.
Trip, you just...
I lost a bet, so
Great.
All
I'm
right,
glad
bro.
we're starting it.
we're sellouts now.
But you know who didn't lose this week?
Who?
Deebo Samuel.
Last
Great transition.
That fool just signed 3 years, $71.5 million, $24 million
Sheesh.
signing bonus, locked up until he's 30.
Sheesh.
Immediate thoughts right now.
Sheesh.
Okay, my thoughts were like so weird. So I don't know what happened in this time span of him becoming a 49er because the first words that you heard, his like brother commented on Facebook like, "Don't worry, we requesting a trade," and Debo was sending all these like messages that he's leaving, and then all of a sudden, I'd say like a few days before you heard peeps that he was re-signing, but a 49er again. I'm excited to see that though. He deserves
For
it.
sure. Great season last year. First team All Pro. 1,770 yards, 14 touchdowns. Pro Bowl, All Pro. I mean, a little bit of an injury concern last year, but it didn't seem to hurt him with all the usage he got in 2022. So.
Oh yeah. For his mileage, he was receiving like 10 targets a game average for an average. Crazy. And he was able to stay relatively healthy, so he's worth it. Brennan, what's your thoughts?
I think it's well deserved. Considering like how much, I mean, he basically put the team on his back during the playoffs. I mean, Elijah Mitchell always helps. But you know, like who he reminds me of, call me crazy, but he reminds me so much of Christian McCaffrey.
Interesting.
The receiving skills, but he's flip-flopped, right?
I can see it.
He's a receiver, but he does running back.
I can see it.
Yeah. So my concern with that comparison is we all know what happened to Christian McCaffrey after his insane workload season.
Right.
So we'll see.
Well, one thing is, I am cheating a bit. I'm looking at Football Reference. I don't know if that is that cheating?
I mean, I did it. It's fine.
So before this, though, I took notes of stats. You compared him to CMC. Obviously, you know, different position, but he did have more rushing touchdowns than receiving touchdowns. 8 to 6. He's still a wonderful receiver. He's all around, and but he has had workload seasons in the past. 2020 was not a workload season, 7 games, but the year before that, 15 games. Still crazy amount of yards per reception. He was still running the ball, not as much, but he was still running the ball a bit, and I think he can keep doing it. He's a workhorse. He doesn't strike me as like a running back who's gonna burn out after 3 years.
Yeah. I don't know. It's something to look out for, but he's definitely an exciting and a pretty fun player because you never really know how the ball is going to end up in his hands from how he lined up. And it's very rare you have a receiver who averages 6 yards a carry. So I think that's a great contract, but it's sort of like what you're really paying for is 1 year of productivity, which I guess is something to think about. But would you not take the gamble? Like, I feel like when he gives you such an amazing year, what more do you really need to see? And it's not like it's this 10-year deal or anything. It's like 3 years. And that covers a lot of what's consistently the prime of a wide receiver. is before they turn 30, or when they turn 30, that's sort of their prime years. And
Mm-hmm.
his contract, very noticeably, that's when it takes place. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good deal, but very easily, if the workload is too much, it could be frowned upon for how expensive it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's so good. So do you think when the 40
Uh-oh.
Man got lost. Oh,
Oh,
oh.
oh.
Well, boys, it looks like we're experiencing some technical difficulties on Trip's side.
Whoops.
Don't know.
Um,
Let me see what I can do. In the meantime,
in the meantime,
super conferences.
super conference.
They are
Yes.
becoming a trend, as we have seen. Trip is back.
Trip,
I don't
you
know.
just disappeared.
He just disappeared. He got Thanos
I
snapped.
bars on my internet.
What matters is that he's back, and
back.
we're talking about super conferences.
Super conferences.
They are becoming a new trend. We saw recently last year, we saw the Oklahoma and Texas move to the SEC by 2025. It sounds like it's going to be 2024 now. Yeah. From what I've heard, moved it a year forward. And then we saw earlier this summer USC and Cal, or was it UCLA?
UCLA
moving
season.
to the Big Ten.
To the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me sounds like sort of a lot of the death of the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Because like all my life, I've been familiar with a Power 5, the big conferences that run college football. The Big 12 has like Baylor. They have like
I think
Oklahoma State.
Baylor will be a pretty consistent contender.
But those are not teams that consistently play at the caliber where it's like they're a playoff team. I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, like if we're talking about Utah and like Oregon on the Pac-12 side of things, would you rather have a 2-loss Oregon or like a 3-loss Texas A&M? Like I think a 3-loss Texas A&M would beat that team. So it's kind of weird that like now there's really 3 powerful conferences with the ACC, the SEC, and the Big Ten, with region completely being thrown out the window.
Right. Well, one thing I will say about the ACC just one thing. Do you think whoever is like drawing up and making these big deals, these conferences with like TV networks and all that, do you think they take into consideration how dominant one and like that one conference, the SEC, and parts of the Big Ten, and one team in the ACC, Clemson, how dominant they are compared to every other team?
Right.
Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC. Now, do people look at it and say, well, now there's 3 conferences with no contenders or that contend every single year. Do we think that can blow stuff up now? Or do you think it will relatively stay the same? Maybe for like 10 to 15 years, there'll just be 1 or 2 dominant conferences.
The thing is, people are already frustrated with 2 SEC teams getting into the playoff consistently, and that's just making more of that.
Right.
Like we're just finding a way to put 2 SEC teams into the playoffs. That's what this feels like to me. And then I wonder how these conferences now structure their divisions. Because like the SEC, it's been, with the exception of Missouri, it's pretty straightforward. These teams are to the West, they're the West. These teams are to the East, they're the East. But now we have 2 teams that are so far west, right? And it's like, what are they going to do? Because when Auburn, like when the South Carolina was first added, Auburn volunteered to move to the East. And Alabama was like, no. They vetoed it. They were the only team that told Auburn they couldn't play in the East. So now I'm wondering, with two Western teams, like, how do you structure a conference in the Big Ten? Like, people are playing in different time zones every week, like drastically different, like 4 6 hour changes every week.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and I don't know how they're going to structure it at all.
I think these are the ideas that lead to like super conferences, and
Yeah.
like I've seen people suggesting that the ABC do what soccer does and have like Group A, Group B, Group.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
And another thing that this conference talk leads to, especially with dominant conferences, is a playoff expansion. I know.
Yeah.
But what exactly happened with the 12-team playoff? Is that still?
It just got pushed like
I
back
think
later.
It helps that for sure, though. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. I'm just saying that probably to push a 12-team playoff narrative for sure.
Football is just a really hard sport to rapid fire. It's like with basketball, you can do March Madness where it's like you play this day, you wait 2 days, you hoop again. Football is not like that because you need so many people on the same page that I have concerns of having such a long tournament. I feel like if you're gonna do it, you'd almost have to like to expand it. You'd almost have to do like 8 teams.
Right.
So I mean that's a little concerning, but also would make things interesting because there'd be some crazy upsets in the playoffs. It'd be kind of fun.
Well, I think the biggest thing that they look for in playoff expansion is to make sure that the 4 best teams still get an advantage, whether that be a bye or just simply seed. I think that's their main focus.
For sure.
No, I disagree.
With
I think their main focus is this.
With money?
That's what I think. I think their main focus is if more teams get in the playoffs, it means more merch, which means more sales, which means more tickets, which means more money. That's what I think they're going for.
I mean, yeah, the NCAA technically is losing money with players. It going straight to players.
Yeah.
So that's something to consider. Because now there's so many more brand opportunities for a player alone. Bryce Young became a millionaire before he was officially the starter at Alabama. People just assumed he was the starter, which obviously he balled, but it's hard to see those things coming.
He won the Heisman, no big deal.
Exactly. It was such a casual Heisman.
One thing I do have a question about, I'm genuinely curious. I want to hear y'all's take. What does, let's say, a 12-team playoff do to where you have the top 4 teams get a bye, and then you have 8 teams play? So that's 4.
Yeah.
And you have there's 6 major bowls, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you have the New Year's 6. So you have 4 of the New Year's 6 in that game, and then when there's 8 teams left, I don't know how. I'm kind of confused. How would they work bowl games, and would that lead to bigger revenue or lost revenue for like the sponsorship of the Rose Bowl or the Sugar Bowl, or what's y'all?
I mean, if it's like the Cotton Bowl and you can guarantee that's the game that the number 1 seed plays the, like, I don't know, number 6 seed, they make it all the way there. They're fighting to see who gets a spot in the national title game. Sponsors will pay so much money to get that game.
Right.
So much money to get that game. So, like, that's an immediate gain for the NCAA. Is just how high the bidding will be to be a New Year's 6 bowl game. So I think that's a lot of how that'll work. Is just the highest bidder wins.
And one thing that would be a positive of the 12-team playoff is some people don't even care about New Year's 6 bowls anymore. I mean, think about it, they're pretty irrelevant if you're not in the playoff.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that would bring back relevance. One thing, if we are changing segments, one more thing I want to ask. Do you think, like, as we get to, like, NIL and stuff, do you think that players will start to opt out of playoff games?
I mean, they already have. Oh, out of playoff games?
So when your team is a chance to win it all, I think people want that.
Right.
But it's kind of hard. I think it being in the cards to win a national title is enough to keep a player.
Yeah. But what if it is a 12-team playoff and let's say your team's a 12 seed and and you're the projected number 1 overall pick, is it worth it? Oh my God. Oakley.
Cat.
You can't be doing that.
Kitty.
I mean, you're saying like, oh, he's this first overall pick guy. He's surefire. That's before draft season.
Right.
It's like people's opinions on players change like that once spring starts because prospect fatigue is real. You watch the combine, you're like, yeah, he was good in college, but this guy hopped up and did 15 reps on the bench press, And all of a sudden, it's like you being the first overall pick guy at the beginning of the year, like, I don't know, like Spencer Rattler was last year. It means nothing.
Right.
It means nothing by the time spring rolls around, but you win that national title.
Right.
And you prove he plays on the big stage and he balls.
Yeah.
All
we have to do is look at Trayvon Walker to see like how fast things change after the combine, Like I remember looking at him and saying like maybe late first, early second,
I thought he was
and then
maybe the second round guy. Deep into spring.
Yeah.
And I thought if the edge rusher was going to go first, it was going to be Aiden Hutchinson.
Right. It was him or Evan Neal, and then Trayvon Walker, and
just bud his way in.
That helped them too. Think about it. The whole Georgia defense having a good combine and him having a great combine, I'm sure that helped him. I'm sure he killed in the interviews. He has a great family. His dad, he's either military or police, I'm pretty sure. So that plays a huge role, obviously, not just play. And
for sure.
Yeah, I think there was some that had him like early third round. That's how.
Yeah. It was just the ceiling of him was so high to Jacksonville. Okay, you said you wanted to pivot, but there's one last thing I'd like to discuss.
Oh.
Okay. Formerly an FCS team, moving up to big time D1 football. James Madison University. Okay.
Let's go.
First time since what is it? Since Georgia State? Georgia State, right? First team to do that since Georgia State. So pretty big deal.
Hold on. I want to talk about the college football playoff because we moved off of that.
Go ahead.
Fast.
Good.
Couple things.
It makes sense with JMU because they're going next year. Continue.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. Well, my thought is with the whole argument that like 2 SEC teams, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of the playoff to me at its very core is you want to see the 4 best teams play it out for the championship title. And to me, looking back the past couple of years, you cannot look at the Bama and Georgia teams and tell me that those two are not one of the 4 best teams.
Absolutely.
That's crazy talk.
Right. We heard this conversation of it's a set 3. There's Bama, Clemson, and Notre Dame. Georgia had just played Alabama to their toughest.
Yeah.
The lead. Jake Fromm balled out. Great game. And I remember listening to the selection show and every single analyst saying, I think it should be Georgia because they're a better team. But Oklahoma were deserving. So, Brent, is what you're trying to get to is that a 12-team playoff would be better because even the deserving team might get seeded higher, but the better team that you think would be ranked 5th or 6th? Is that where you're trying to get at?
No, I still think the 4 team is optimal because what happens then, for example, like the Notre Dame 3, I mean, of course there's flaws, but that Notre Dame 3, I mean, they got blown out of the water, bro. That was embarrassing.
Georgia, they got blown out.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. I mean, it's T-Law, but I mean, like, come on, bro. That was embarrassing.
Georgia fan, so it's a little biased, but Kirby Smart in his press conference, he made such a good point. He said, you ask that coach on the opposing sideline who he doesn't want to play, he'll start with us. And I feel like the playoff doesn't really recognize that. At sometimes.
Yeah. And then sometimes that team that doesn't make it is just a fraud.
That's true.
Like TCU that one year where they barely missed the national title game. They were ranked like number 3, and they had to play in the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State. Does anyone know where this is going? And Boise State beat them in overtime.
That was Baylor, Baylor and TCU both missed out on the first or second ever playoff. Baylor played F in the Fiesta Bowl. That's Blake Bortles' time. They got beat by UCF, but then TCU ended up handling business against Ole Miss in the Chick-fil-A Bowl, I think. But that's and I remember Art Briles, their former coach, ended up making a huge thing about Baylor not making the playoff. Then they lose to UCF, and then TCU's coach, what's his name?
No.
Patterson? Right? Something like that?
He didn't make a big deal. They handle business. So there was some debate. There was also debate about, like, did Baylor want to win that game? But that's I think it's very interesting, for sure. I'm open for expansion, though, for those reasons.
Okay, it was Gary Patterson.
It was Gary Patterson.
It is now, it is now Sonny Dykes is the current head coach.
So I feel like some of the best parts about the college football playoff, right, is like you see that game with Justin Fields where he was like playing with broken ribs and he's just airing it out anyway, you know? And like it starts the excitement of like who out of these guys is going to be deemed to be the best in the NFL, right? And there were a few like surprising people who didn't declare for the draft that maybe people thought they would, and then some young quarterbacks who are on the rise and maybe have chances of doing something great. And I think you guys both have some people in mind, so I'm going to say the people you weren't going to say.
Okay.
And then we'll work backwards. Okay. Should I start with the craziest ones or?
Sure.
Okay.
How many do you have?
I'm gonna say 5 you're not gonna mention, and then the 2 you're obviously thinking of.
We're only
Okay.
Cool.
So we can talk for this a bit.
Okay. I think my craziest one, quarterback out of Kentucky, Will Levis.
Dude, Brennan, why are you shaking your head?
All right. 6'3", 230. All right. Didn't start the full year. Big arm guy.
Right.
I feel like when I was looking at stuff for this, everyone was saying like, oh, he's a lot like Dak Prescott. But when I watch him play, he's more of Josh Allen. He's not quite the athlete of Josh Allen, but just that big arm.
Right.
Just kind of reminds me of that. And if he has like a random year where he just like pops off and he throws a bunch of yards and touchdowns, I could really see him not only carrying Kentucky and so realizing like, oh, you know, like he knows how to lead a team, but also just statistically performing well. Right. The next one I want to bring up is what remains of. Go ahead.
All right. So a lot of people like to bring up that Georgia game, where they practically got shut out. I know they didn't, but pretty much a shut.
Oh yeah.
I think the difference in team, like talent there, played a huge role in that. And Will Levis, he is such a gamer. He is such a he's very athletic. He reminds me of a Tim Tebow with good mechanics and a big arm, and even bigger.
Yeah.
I think he could very well succeed in the NFL. Because people with that right mindset, I remember last episode we talked about Matt Corral's mindset. People with that mindset of just go out there and ball, and Levis hurdling over people and putting a team on his back. That's successful in the NFL.
Here's the thing with me. You're taking a ceiling on a Kentucky quarterback.
Yes, sir.
That is the thing. That's the thing that I can't get
So what's
on
the floor then? What's the floor?
I don't know.
The floor is, like you said, Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, there you go.
Should I say one that'll make you mad? No, I won't say one that'll make you mad. Okay.
No, please don't.
of the UGA defense, Mr. Jalen Carter.
Nolan Smith. Oh.
Okay. He was PFF gave him this crazy good rating. And basically love Jordan Davis. I'm not going to say anything against Jordan Davis, but what I will say is he played very minimal snaps at Georgia. He'd take like 15, 20 a game. So who is playing interior defensive line in anything other than the situation where Jordan Davis works? And it's Jalen Carter every time.
Yeah, Jalen for sure. He just absolute run stopper. Put up great stats. Maybe I'm no expert on linemen, that's for sure, but
yeah, it's hard to be. They're hard to follow.
It doesn't. I don't. What are his exact measurements? Just seeing him on like in the field and like TV, he may be a tad undersized, or am I?
Yes, he's a little bit undersized. Yeah. Yes, but even at a position where like it's hard to take stats,
right?
And he's not on the field all the time. I mean, still solid. 3 sacks, 37 tackles, 8.5 TFLs. That's not awful. And I feel like with more reps, because he is going to be the defensive lineman at Georgia.
Right.
It's like people will see that and be like, wow, he's a dog. But again, if he can only play interior defensive line, value in the league is pretty low.
Yeah.
Fun little excerpt about Jalen Carter. I was downtown the other day, and I think I saw him roll by in his very nice, tricked up Dodge Charger with a giant 88 chain hanging from the mirror.
Nice. So,
definitely Jalen
I mean,
Carter.
we're talking.
One thing,
it was massive.
It's interesting. Put up great stats, not as like as flashy of a player as JD because he's not as like this big, giant, as marketable guy. Put up probably better stats, but one thing that you can't is when you're running the ball up the middle, you don't want to go to Jalen Carter's side. You practice makes the running back bounce to the outside. You can't. I know there's a new stat called like quarterback pressures, but
yes,
I don't know how concrete that is. He gets after the quarterback. That whole D line got after the quarterback, but
yeah,
in the NFL because he's a Georgia Bulldog.
Exactly. All right. So for my next one, we have guy very hyped out of high school. Okay. He played decently but disappointed at his big time school. He's now leaving for a new school that's going to be built around him with a coach. Brendan Caesar, this is going. A coach who maybe it's his last chance to be a head coach at D1 football. And he's going to build around Mr. Spencer Rattler. What do you think about the redemption arc of Spencer Rattler?
No. Brennan, you have something to say, so I want to hear your take.
I think anyone who goes to South Carolina as a final gambit is flawed and crazy and not mentally sane.
But if there's anyone who has like more to lose and everything to gain, it's Spencer Rattler.
Yeah, but
he was embarrassed last year. He lost his job to a freshman, and he's playing with a coach who, like, Spencer Rattler's his last hope. He's going to try to get every ounce of productivity he can. And I think just the hype out of high school, if he plays well, is enough to be like, it's confirmed. The ceiling is high enough for him to be a high pick. He just needs to show it. He needs some big upset. He needs, like, to actually show he has it going on upstairs, that he can have good decision making. He just needs to put in the effort. What are your thoughts now that I've stated my case for the redemption arc of Spencer Rattler?
I mean, it's not crazy, but I just don't know.
It doesn't seem likely. I'll admit it, but I felt like it would be a missed opportunity to not mention him after all the hype he got. And then another guy who's surprisingly getting no hype when De'Aaron King went out at Miami. It was sort of, I mentally checked out on Miami a lot. I didn't think they were going to do anything. But young quarterback Tyler Van Dyke came in like midway through the year and outplayed him.
All right.
And he was just an excellent passer.
Did I leave the thing? Okay. That was
Yes.
screen time. My mom had to enter the passcode.
Oh, well.
Okay.
Are we still talking about Spencer Rattler? I'd like to see.
We're talking about Tyler Van Dyke.
Oh, can I say something about Spencer Rattler real quick?
Go ahead.
Oh my
If
gosh.
you're playing on a borderline elite team like Oklahoma and playing average teams in the Big 12, who's the best team other than Oklahoma in the Big 12 last year?
Baylor.
Yeah.
Look, they weren't close to elite, and you can't put up good stats. I don't think you're that good. And the thing with South Carolina, I think since they are crosstown rivals with Clemson, and they play them every year, I think they were trying to exactly copy what Clemson did and hire a young, skill position coach like Clemson did with Dabo Swinney, and kind of what was that hire? And I think South Carolina was trying to replicate Clemson, and I don't think it worked.
Maybe it does.
Okay.
We'll think about it and I guess just see how it unfolds. But I felt like it'd be an idiot if I didn't mention him and then he balls out this year.
Right.
But back to Tyler Van Dyke, massive, 6'4", 220, and in pretty limited play time, just played better than De'Aaron King, who I thought was an NFL caliber quarterback. I don't know if people agree with me on that, but I just thought that was the case. Does anyone have anything to talk about with Tyler Van Dyke or?
He's just raw.
Very raw.
That's the thing with me. Yeah.
I feel like I know nothing about him. I knew he played for Miami. I had to look him up.
Yeah.
Third year sophomore. I saw him play one game, and the one game I saw, I'm pretty sure he played well, and I think he looks like him too. I think it could be very similar to Will Levis. Is he an athlete or no?
He's definitely more of a pocket passer as far as I'm aware. I almost think that like if he went pro and he was on the board and the Giants were picking, they should do it.
Right.
If he plays well.
Because in the NFL, not all the time, we've seen that big pocket passers with big arms can really.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I don't know too much about him.
For sure.
Hey, Exhibit A, Matthew Stafford.
There you go. I mean, he fits the bill right there. Okay. I know who you guys are thinking about, so I'll say one last one, but I think he's pretty likely. And if he doesn't go first overall, I think he's a top 5 pick, which is Will Anderson Jr. Only a sophomore last year, but we see the value of edge rushers. It's just going up every season.
Right.
People are looking for that guy who can do everything. As a sophomore at Bama, at 6'4", 235 pounds, 17 and a half sacks, 31 TFLs, 101 total tackles. I mean, that's phenomenal. If he shows anything like what he did last year, and if he did better, I feel like he's almost sworn into the first overall pick.
Yeah.
Because there's not much you can teach a guy who can get like 20 sacks at a high level. And it's not just all schemed. He's just powerful enough to get there.
I think this, to some people, might sound crazy, but to people who know football, I don't think this is a hot take. I think he might be the best player in college football.
Yes, I think so.
I think the reason people, like, edge rushing stock has gone up is because we've seen people like Aiden Hutchinson, Chase Young, Trayvon Walker, and now Will Anderson. These big guys that rack up stats, but it's not just that. They can change the whole game. Like, do you remember that Chase Young went on where the offense couldn't do anything? He got like 4 fumbles. It was crazy.
Yeah.
They can change a game completely and dominate. They can still get double teamed, get to the quarterback. And I think NFL GMs are realizing how valuable that is to completely change the game with one player on the defensive side of the ball.
Right.
I mean, all we have to do to see the value of edges is look at the fine Pittsburgh Steelers
Yes.
and look at last year's Defensive Player of the
Yes.
Year, and you see Mr. 90, TJ Watt. I mean, the guy is an absolute freak of nature. He's just crazy, crazy, crazy good. And if we want to get even a step further, to a guy who I think is top 3 in the NFL right now, a player just overall, Myles freaking Garrett is an insane. Have you seen that man, bro?
He changes
If
games.
he's not on roids, that man is an absolute freak, bro.
And they knew it. He was the first overall pick.
Yeah.
And it showed. And I feel like with Will Anderson, he's the same kind of prospect where it's like, look at him. He's great. Why would you not want that on your team? And there's room to get better still,
especially
too.
if he turns into a guy like Myles Garrett. He was still incredibly built in college, but now he has put on much more mass, and he's insanely quick. If Will Anderson puts on more mass, he's not going to lose his speed. I think he'd be exactly like a Myles Garrett. He'd be very huge, sitting at like 240, 250, probably only like 15% body fat. I think, and trust me, the NFL helps you put on mass. He continued.
Definitely.
I'm sure he's a hard worker. I think he should be picked if he decides to.
All right. And I'll let you guys battle it out with the quarterbacks now. CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Who is the first overall pick between them? If the first team on the board is looking for a quarterback, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young?
Brennan, I know you have some choice words for CJ Stroud, so.
We know how Brennan feels.
Look, I believe in the kid CJ Stroud. I don't believe in the player CJ Stroud. I'm going to have to see some real work on tape and make him make some good decisions using his athleticism to warrant a number 1 round pick or a first round pick. Okay?
Wow.
Not a first round pick. I think he's a first round pick. I think he's I don't think he's the first overall pick.
He should be the first round pick. He not as big as an arm, still has a great arm. Maybe a bit smaller, but more talented. Joe Burrow. Think about
Joe Burrow. Yeah.
Joe Burrow. Perfect accuracy on the ball. When he throws a spiral, it spins a lot. He has good arm strength. Running around, Bryce Young is a better athlete than Joe Burrow. In 2019, Joe Burrow was making plays, evading defenders, being able to run. So creative, very high football IQ, great defense picker, if that's a word. Just what's it called? Picking.
He's good at dissecting the defense.
Yeah, dissecting the defense.
Yeah.
Bryce Young is that guy. Athletic guy, makes plays all across the field. Great arm. He's just such a great passer. And I'm not saying CJ Stroud isn't that guy. I'm a big believer.
Right.
Reminds me of Justin Fields, but I think a guy like Bryce Young is so valuable. I think you got to take him.
Here's what I come back to for Bryce Young.
Okay.
And I think since we've, got out of the college football season, I think we've forgotten. Okay? But that kid is just a baller. And he will do whatever
at him as a sophomore.
He will do whatever it takes to win. Do you guys remember? I think it was in the SEC championship where, pocket is collapsing. He's got Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith in his face, and he looks and he no-look flicks the ball to Brian Robinson. You know the play I'm talking about? I just lost all hope at that point. How do you stop that? How do you stop that? He's not even looking.
Exactly.
He's just a baller, and, some people can sit here and say it's luck, but you can turn on the tape from the rest of the season, and I can pretty confidently say that was not luck. He's just a baller.
As my stepdad says, shout out Mark, he made a good point. He's a magician, dude. He can make plays solely by himself. And I think the play that you provided with us, Brent, that's so perfect. He's like a magician. He can turn nothing into something.
I think the best comparison for him, somebody I always come back to when I see his tape, is Russell Wilson. That's who he reminds me of personally.
Can I provide another?
All right, let's hear it.
I watched both of these guys at Bama, and I can't stop seeing Tua when I watch him. And I feel like in the case of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, it's going to be the case of Tua and Burrow again in a different way. I think Bryce Young was early to the train. He's won his Heisman, right? God forbid something bad happens to Bryce Young. That could hurt his stock. Or if something great happens to CJ Stroud, let's say CJ Stroud this year, he wins the Heisman. Now, all of a sudden, there's this spotlight on CJ Stroud because he's the more recent one. You know, he's the one people grapple onto. And then he's got so much more size than Bryce Young does.
Right.
He's 3 inches taller and he's 20 pounds heavier, you know? So, and then when they're kind of comparable in terms of their stats at college, you sort of start to think like, I see CJ Stroud playing well more recently, and I see Bryce Young playing well. I think if I had the first overall pick, I'd want Bryce Young. I do. I think he has more ability to change a franchise. But I just feel like if recency bias tells us anything, it's that if something bad happens to Tua, tank for Tua, everyone was all in on it. Tua's the first overall pick. He's the first overall pick. He's the fourth overall pick.
Right.
And it could happen to Bryce Young. I mean, I see
I'll
it.
say about that Tua and Bryce Young comparison. Tua, even though he is an NFL quarterback, keeping his job for who knows how long, he is still what seems like a first read quarterback, right? He is not the best at going through his progressions because at Alabama, most games, he didn't have to go through progressions. His first read was just Devontae Smith burning some 3-star corner from Mississippi State. And like that Georgia SEC championship game in 2018 and the national championship, those defenses, the Clemson defense and Georgia defense, those defense that had the right amount of talent that made Tua go through his progressions and switch his reads, those gave him trouble. And I feel like Bryce Young isn't that guy. And another thing is, if there is a play that blows up, I feel like I'd take Bryce Young to at least get some yards out of it, other than Tua. Because Tua, he's still a great athlete, but I'd still take Bryce Young. He's more of that magician type.
I do think Tua played well enough in those things you pointed out he didn't in the LSU game against Burrow, but I do see your point that there are like Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, and Devontae Smith. Those then
all first round picks.
Exactly, all first round picks. Like anywhere he looked, the guy was going to catch the ball. So I mean, I can see your point. I can see your point.
No pun. I wasn't trying to make a joke there.
Okay.
Wrapping up the draft talk, boys. Quickly, because we're approaching our timestamp very fast. Quickly, Anthony Barr to the Cowboys.
Yes,
thoughts? Does this make the Cowboys even more broken?
Okay. Dude, they're an XP farming glitch.
Dude, infinite money glitch?
I don't know. It's like Anthony Barr, it's like historically has been this great linebacker, but it's been 2017 was the last time he played an entire season. But you risked nothing getting him.
I remember him like with those Vikings defenses, like the ones that went to the NFC Championship, those like Harrison Smith. Is he still on the Vikings?
Yes.
Yeah,
he's just aging.
He was Pro Bowl last year, right?
Harrison?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah, maybe.
I thought it was Minka who got the strong safety.
I don't know.
Oh, no, Minka's AFC, so it's fine.
I remember him. I haven't heard much of him in the past 2-3 years. The Broncos, or not the Cowboys are a very interesting team. I feel they're kind of like the Yankees of football. They can have the greatest lineup, the greatest pitching, and they still won't get it done as long as Cashman is GM. What do we think about the Cowboys? Are they similar to the Yankees in that manner?
Yes, because as long as Mike McCarthy is their coach, I don't think they will ever win a playoff game. And you can, clip this all you want. Next year, if they win the Super Bowl, I'll eat my words, whatever. But I think, there's this meme that I saw from back in the day from thedrawplay.com. Shout outs to my boy, where it's Aaron Rodgers, talking to the mic, hey, coach, can we switch the game plan? And Mike looks at his little clipboard and it says game plan. Aaron does cool and Aaron does cool crap and we score touchdowns. And he looks up and goes, "No, let's stick with the game plan." So I mean, I think that's pretty telling of those Packers teams. I mean, you had Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson, and somehow he took those teams to the playoffs like every year. I just think that's Aaron Rodgers being great.
Yeah.
I don't think
Well,
I don't think most of the Packers' success had to do with the coach.
I'm looking at his Pro Football Reference. He's averaged 9 games in the past 3 years, he's putting up hardly any stats. So I feel this is similar to when this 2 years ago when the Chiefs signed Le'Veon Bell and everybody made a deal about it. He ended up doing absolutely nothing. Saying Anthony Barr can't turn it around. You see guys who have seemed to kind of lost their prime, and then they get a new wind of a new team, and they kind of catch fire. Wasn't that kind of the case with Robbie Anderson, even though he's kind of trash now? But I don't know. I feel like that's the Cowboys' job is to just sign these big names and not.
Yeah. I mean, he's 1 year, $3 million. I don't even know if that's a starter, but I feel like with Anthony Barr's skill level, he should be. Maybe it's just a finesse, honestly. But I feel like, who was it that they lost in free agency to the Broncos? Like, they just lost him. It was some linebacker that they lost.
Randy Gregory?
Right?
Yeah.
The Boise State guy?
Yeah.
Randy Gregory. That's what I'm thinking about, right?
I don't remember. I think so.
I mean, if this is a replacement for that, it's just like a seasoned veteran who won't make stupid mistakes and is on a really low risk contract. So, I mean, it's fine. It's just not a long-term solution and not really a position of need. Like, if you're going to go out there and spend money, I don't understand why it's a linebacker, but hey.
So last closing thought on that Cowboys locker room, specifically the linebackers. If Anthony Barr does stay healthy and does contribute, you now have Micah Parsons, Anthony Barr, and Leighton Vander Esch on the same linebacker room. So with that being said, boys, that is going to wrap up Tim Patrick. Oh, he's hurt.
Yeah, tore his ACL.
We'll get to Tim Patrick. We'll get to Tim Patrick next episode, as well as some more injuries, maybe some other trades that's going on, maybe some fantasy football. We'll see. You have to check us out. We should be on Spotify coming up in the next 2 or 3 days, or Amazon if you're crazy and live under a rock and use Amazon. But yeah, thanks for checking us out. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. And
follow our Twitter. Nobody is following our Twitter. Our Instagram and TikTok are doing good. We're not going to post clips on Twitter. We're just going to
doing well.
Episode. Make sure to follow us on TikTok. We're doing good on there. Our YouTube shorts doing well. Instagram. I know a lot of our friends follow us on there. You'll get linked everywhere. Brennan, I think if you can make the clips, I think you could email them to me. I know your computer's slow. And then from a computer, because I don't have my phone for 7 days, I think on a computer I could maybe upload the clip. But I think
Okay, Trip. All right, guys. We'll see you next episode.